It is a truth universally acknowledged that 1 in 5 people have seen or read Pride and Prejudice. Just kidding. Or actually, it might be true. I don't know. I have for long avoided discussing dresses, costumes, and Jane Austen, as most of her adaptations are set in the Regency era. But should they be? Quick Jane Austen recap. She was born in 1775 to a modest family. Her father was a rector, her mother had a small inheritance, and she had 5 siblings. Austen's first writings were often referred to as a juvenilia and includes works such as Lady Susan. Her first novel seems to have been Eleanor and Marianne, an early version of Sense and Sensibility. This was followed by an early draft of Pride and Prejudice called First Impressions. This wasn't published until 1813, which is why I think a lot of her adaptations are set in the Regency period. So what I propose to do is to watch this film and give you my first impressions, get it, of the costumes. I've seen this film many times, but because it's usually set in the Regency, I never really look at Jane Austen films looking out for the costumes to try and analyse them. However, I thought we'd give it a go. I will do any further research during the editing process so I can add things like fashion plates or quotes that either disprove or prove my first thoughts. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the costumes as well. So let's get to it. This first scene is actually really cool because it has a bonnet and a bunch of fabric just laying around on the table, so you can sort of see what they're going for. These seem to be like printed cottons, which were pretty popular in the Regency times. Kind of forgot why I was watching this. And this opening scene in particular, you can see that the girls' dresses are moving a bit more towards the Regency style, but Mrs. Bennet in particular is still set in the 18th century. Her dress it's got all the style lines of the 18th century, and it looks like it should be worn over stays. I think that's the really big give, is that none of the girls' dresses look like they could be worn over stays, but Mrs. Bennet absolutely does, and she's got the fichu. She's got the 3/4 sleeves with a decoration on the cuffs. So my theory for this is that well, not my theory, I think someone in one of my previous videos actually commented that there's a DVD feature where the costume designer says they've set it in the transitional period between late 1790s and early 1800s, which makes complete sense because that's when the novel was first written. It is quite typical for older women to be represented in earlier styles than the current setting of the film. I think something that's really giving as well is the waistlines. So if you watch the waistlines between all of these 5 women, you can see distinct differences. So the younger ones have a much higher waistline than Mrs. Bennet, but they don't have a consistent waistline. So for example, Lizzie's is quite high on this one, but then Kitty's is a bit lower. And obviously those really, really high-waisted empire waist dresses were most particular to the late Regency period. I don't think I'll bother looking into Mr. Bennet's or the men's because I don't really do men's fashion. Also, apparently the house where they filmed this is quite nearby me, and I'm really tempted to go there one day wearing this dress. So the ball scene is really interesting because there's so many extras, and obviously it's meant to be evening wear. It's meant to be a higher style of dress than their day dresses, and you can see they've got a really large variety of dresses here. But it is important to note that none of the Bennets have very stylish or very expensive looking dresses. So interestingly, one of the extras has a really high empire waist dress, and then there's just, a lot of them have round sort of wrap over dresses, so that's a bit later on. So I think Miss Bingley, Mr. Bingley's sister, comes in here to sort of really offset the Bennets because she's wearing in this ball gown setting, she's got this very Regency looking dress because it's got a very, very high waist where it's just under her bust. I've never seen this sort of sleeve, but it has a very distinct Regency look about it. So I think the idea is that obviously they come from town, they're more fashionable, they're richer, so they can afford more recent and more elaborate fashions. Which I think works, because it does make sense that if the Bennets are, you know, low on income and in the countryside, they would have less fashionable dresses, older styles, possibly even hand-me-downs. So the younger sisters, Kitty and Lydia, will have dresses from their older sisters that have been altered to fit them, and even possibly altered to fit the style. Here is Mrs. Bennet peeking through in her very 18th century dress. Which again makes complete sense, because she would have gotten these dresses when she was wealthy, because I think the idea is that their family had a bit more money. This is in the book. They talk about how they married really early and they've never got a hold of their income or spent accordingly to their income. They have 5 children to keep. So I think it does make complete sense that she wouldn't have that many recent dresses. There's someone legitimately wearing a caraco sort of jacket style in the background. It's all over the place. Something I really don't like about Miss Bingley's dress is that her sleeves just look elasticated. Yeah, wild mix here. In the extras, there's like people wearing fichus and proper 18th century looking styles, and then there's people looking, you know, those Regency styles where it's like a scoop neckline and then there's a high sort of partlet thing. Don't know what they're called. I will research after this, but there was someone just wearing that. Elizabeth's dresses literally look like they're all the same style, just different fabrics. To be fair, they are really simple dresses, all of Elizabeth's, but they do look really good. This dress where she walks to Netherfield is just really nice, and she's got, all of her dresses seem to be smooth in the front, gathered in the back, really simple round necklines and close at the front. But now it's really interesting as well, because you get to see Miss Bingley's day wear, which looks quite distinct from everyone else. The dresses has a much softer colour, which is also really good, because obviously if you had more money you could buy stronger dyed fabrics.
Did you see her hair? 6 inches deep in mud.
She looked positively medieval. That's not in the book, but the bit about the petticoat in 6 inch deep in mud is in the book. This scene I have issues with, right? So Jane is like on her deathbed and Lizzie comes to visit and she's only wearing a chemise, and Mr. Bingley comes in. What? This is entirely wrong. There's no way he'd see her in such a state of undress. It's ridiculous. It's kind of like, you know, in a New Little Women when Teddy comes into their house while they're all sort of in states of undress after such a short acquaintance. Even in a long acquaintance, people wouldn't be seeing each other in just a chemise, because you have to think about how light those fabrics are. It's akin to being naked, really. So it's not something that Mr. Bingley would just walk into that room like that. Completely inappropriate. Oh, the officers. So I definitely think they really did try to set this in this transitional period, except for Miss Bingley and sort of the higher classes from the town, which are meant to show their wealth by being a couple of years ahead. This striped dress that Lizzie wears to Netherfield is actually very close in construction to this one, where it has the centre front closure and then a little strap that overlaps with a slit on the side. Something really interesting that they have done really well is the sleeves, because it is quite renowned that through history, short sleeves mean evening wear and long sleeves are for the day. So far, I think I've noticed consistently that they've got longer sleeves during the day. All the dresses all together. I really like the costumes, whether they're historically accurate or not. I really like them. I think they've done a really good job in layering different things and making them look, although not expensive, not wealthy person's costume, they look really nice with so they've all got little reticules, they've all got bonnets or hats, very important. So I think they've done a really good job and I really do enjoy them. And this sort of the 3 Bennets in pastel colours and then Mary just in her really somber, really plain. It's kind of like you've got a Jane Austen novel and then you've suddenly got like a Bronte.
I find it perfectly adequate.
Miss Bingley again has a very Empire style dress. I will definitely find a fashion plate for this because it is very, very Empire looking. So for example, it kind of looks like Lydia or Kitty, I really can't tell from this far apart, might wear something like very similar to a chemise à la reine kind of style of dress. Here we go. Oh, something really interesting that I've noticed as well is that there's at least 2 shirts. She has 2 of these shirts because the seams at the shoulder are felled in different ways in these 2 different shirts. Oh, I love this scene in the haberdashery with all the ribbons and everything. I'm still to acquire a shawl. Seams! I can see those seams. Now that I'm rewatching the film looking out for those seams, I can see the seams in the bodice. Wickham's uniform is actually banging. Boo-hoo Wickham, cry me a river. Now this is my favourite scene because you can see them getting ready. So you can see their stays, you can see all the undergarments. I love undergarments. So this is Kitty and Lydia. Kitty has what looks like full-boned 18th century stays. And here we go. So Jane has what looks much more like Regency short stays, while Elizabeth has what looks like, there's one pair of this that I've seen extant, which is sort of transitional stays, which looks like a really weird hybrid in between Regency stays and 18th century stays. And here we go, and then the ball. It's really interesting because since this ball is held at Netherfield and not the assembly rooms, it does seem like the class of people that are attending have a much higher level of dress. So you can see in the first shot there's a woman coming out of a carriage with what looks like a very Regency looking dress with the high waist and the puff sleeves, very much like Miss Bingley. So you can assume these are people from town. They're wealthier acquaintances. Much more sumptuous fabrics as well. Now, this dress that Miss Bingley wears, I absolutely detest. I don't get it. I don't see the purpose of doing her like a little tank top. Like, I've never seen any Regency fashion plates or anything that look even remotely like this. I'm gonna do some more research after this, but I don't think I've ever seen a sleeveless dress because this looks exactly like what the dress is drafted, but with that adding on the sleeves. And this is probably Elizabeth's finest dress in the film. It's a wraparound dress, which is very transitional as well, going into that Regency time, but it's got a little bit of trim around the edges, the fabric looks a bit better, and her hair is properly made up now. Costume designers have not been kind to Charlotte, I don't think. Her dress in this is very strange as well. This is much more the picture of Regency, which is light, fluffy, white dresses. But this is only for the Netherfield ball, because if you compare it to the Assembly Rooms ball, they were wearing all sorts of styles and very bright colours. So it's definitely circumstantial to the position. And it does support the idea that the Bingleys coming from town are a few years ahead. Just look at the contrast in this. I'm going to put the screenshot in here, but there's 2, so there's Miss Bennet and someone else that are wearing what looks like very 18th century dresses. And then there's a younger person on the left wearing a proper Regency where like it looks like the waistline is on the bust. They're all wearing dresses they've worn before, and for example Lydia is now wearing a dress that Jane wore in an earlier scene. Oh, I do love seeing these dresses when they're running away. They just look so good. Here's the dress again.
Happy to visit you at your earliest convenience.
In the book, again, it would not be appropriate for Elizabeth to travel alone. So she actually travels with Charlotte's sister and father who go to visit her, and then she stays there with the sister for about 6 weeks.
How wonderful.
So Lizzie's dress here is blue and it looks exactly like all her other dresses. Very interesting here though is that so they're visiting Lady Catherine, so of course they have to wear their best dresses. Interestingly, Lizzie is wearing the dress she wore to the Assembly Rooms ball, and Charlotte is wearing a new dress where it kind of looks like an 18th century style. And as soon as you see Lady Catherine, you can tell why. She's high aristocracy, and she does look very 18th century. She's got the hedgehog hair going with the little curls on the side. She's like, if Miss Bennet had money, she would look like that.
If her health would have allowed. Lady Catherine.
I do not have the talent of conversing easily with people I have never met before.
Perhaps you should take your aunt's advice and practice.
This film is basically Elizabeth endlessly roasting Darcy.
Affection, but with a suspicion. One would reckon not.
Bonnets, though. I feel like we need a whole moment just to appreciate the variety of hats in this film. And the constant use of hats as well. I know in a lot of films they usually don't put hats on people when they go outside because somehow hats have become unattractive in today's times, but they would have not gone out without a bonnet. Like, it's just not the way. Here we go, guys. Here we go, lads. Her hem again in mud. I do wonder what's happened to her hat though, because I think the idea is that this is her going for a walk after this church, but her hat's gone. Where is it? This is very interesting because this is meant to be what, loungewear, I suppose, where she's got this loose brown robe sort of thing over what looks like to be just her chemise. This scene I've always found a little strange because he would never be admitted into her room when she was in this state of undress. And it's so weird that, like, it's for the cinematic drama, of course, but that he just walks in, drops the letter, and she doesn't even turn around. What's that about? Quite interesting though, that he does have this sort of look of disarray about him as well. So he's got his unbuttoned shirt and a loose coat, so it does look, I think they've done a really good job in portraying sort of emotional upheaval through their costumes. Her aunt is quite interesting as well because it's the same sort of situation as Mrs. Bennet, but she's got a different look to her clothes, and she's got earrings. She's just a bit like a more done up version of Mrs. Bennet. I think we're coming up to what might be everyone's favourite scene, which is when she's in the Peak District and she's in like that massive amazing cliff, and then there's that amazing scene. I really wish I could include more of the film and all of the soundtrack in this video, but unfortunately copyright is the thing. Damn son, Pemberley. Same Lizzie, same. Her striped dress here, I think, is also a favourite. It's a really simple dress, same sort of style lines as before, except it's a wraparound dress, which is again very transitional. I think between so in the late 18th century they sort of moved from the sort of really structured dresses to chemise à la reine kinds of dresses, which were simpler, less constructed or less construction heavy and looser, and I think wraparound dresses sort of came around from that, and there's just something about it that looks really good. It looks like linen to me. Oh, it's got a back closure? What? It's got some lacing at the back, I guess to make it more adjustable. That's a questionable. Again, the housekeeper, older character, very 18th century style with a fichu, a front point, structured bodice kind of look, and lower waistline. Oh, this dress is lovely, you know. Maybe I should make this next. The hem has a sort of flounce, not gathered, the plain flounce of the same striped fabric but on the bias, and just chevrons at the front. Pretty cool. I think it's also important to keep in mind the waistlines and the bodies they're on, because Keira Knightley's waistline looks high because she's got a very long torso. Well, I have a very short torso, so my high waist is about like an inch difference from a natural waist. Also, how funny is it that everyone in Britain only knows this one piano song?
Yes.
What's happened to her carriage? It literally came to the house in the carriage and now she wants to walk back to the village. Did her aunt and uncle just leave her? Is that the idea? They just left her behind. Now this brown dress of Elizabeth I like because... So something they did in Regency as well was that sometimes there was a flap that came up. I think I showed a little bit of this in my making of video of this, but there was some dresses they would close at the waist with drawstrings, and then the front closure would be just a flap of dress that would come up and be pinned in place, and this brown dress of her looks exactly like that. Apron front, that's what they were called. They were called apron front dresses, I think.
But he says you...
I feel like I should have started with this disclaimer, but also I don't do Regency fashion. All I've known is what I've seen from the little snippets of this film, a really good video by Enchanted Rose Costumes, which I'll link down below. Films, I've seen every Jane Austen adaptation that has been made pretty much. Honestly, I don't know what to do about Kitty's dresses in this film. You can very clearly see Mrs. Bennet's stays in this scene, and she's got some sort of quilted thing over top, which I find very interesting. Yeah, they're straight up 18th century stays. I do love that there are some really good detail shots in this film of some of the dresses, like this lovely little petticoat of Mrs. Bennet. She's just lying down on the sofa like eating. I completely understand that state of mind. I love also in this scene that since they're coming and they want to look really good, Jane adds a little pink ribbon to her dress. It's like a sort of dressing up. Yes! You can actually see Miss Bennet's, the thing I was talking about earlier, looks like jumps. Her little quitted cover that she was wearing of her stays. She's wearing them right now and it looks like jumps. Also, all of them are just in their nightwear and they're receiving Lady Catherine. Okay. That doesn't happen in the book. It's just a normal daytime visit. I know people talk about the Colin Firth scene where he comes out of the water in the wet shirt, and yeah, alright, that's great. I just love the way Mr. Darcy walks through the early morning fog with the swinging coat and the unbuttoned shirt. It does something. And that is it. Just wanted to wrap this up real quick. Thank you so much for watching if you watched this far. I don't know how this is going to end up looking like after I edit, but I imagine it won't be as interesting as I thought it would be. I just wanted to dress up as Elizabeth Bennet and watch Pride and Prejudice. What can you do? I will have added as many fashion plates, whatever, to make this a little bit more interesting as possible. I really enjoyed this. I feel like I might do this for more films because often what happens is I either forget little details or I get wrapped up in the story or I'm doing something else at the same time, like sewing, and I don't really watch out for the details. And this was really pleasing, and I took a lot of screenshots. If I want to make another costume, maybe the stripy one, I think that one's gonna bother me for a little while longer. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you for our next video.